Perfect.
You guys are live.
Awesome.
Hey, Sam.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Fantastic. So thank you so much for joining us on the first official episode of the Muzie Show.
Thanks for having me. Glad to join you.
Absolutely. So basically, as we've sort of said, we did episode 0 a few weeks ago, which was the real test run to see what's going on. We think we fixed most of the technical glitches, so I'm sure we'll get 20 messages in a second telling us that they can't hear us or can't see us or any of those million things that we know are pretty much inevitable. But I thank you so much for joining me, and I thought it'd be fun to sort of reverse the roles. So we've sort of done the other version of this podcast conversation before, but I was hoping to sort of interview you a little bit and kind of get to know a little bit more about how Nate got to where he is now and all that stuff. And I do see that all your mandolins are off the wall, so is that for the...
This is for the move. I think I told you I'm moving, right?
Yeah.
I was kind of cracking up this morning because our last call was all about studio setup. And I was talking about the stuff on the walls, and now it's like it's starting to look... It's probably already sounds more echoey in here.
Right? It's so funny how it's like, after, once you start putting all your stuff away, like taking them off the walls, packing everything, and move off to the new place, it's also the perfect time to reset the studio. So I guess actually just sort of popped in my head is there anything you're going to do in the new place that's drastically different from what you have been doing?
Yes, I'm going to try to set things up to where there can be less visual noise because the way this space works, I had to keep a lot of my stuff in that corner.
Sure.
Which was 1,000% more stuff than I wanted to have in that corner.
Right.
For the next one, which we're actually going to be somewhere 6 months while we're figuring out where we want to buy. So I'm about to set up my studio twice.
Oh, okay.
But the next one, I'm going to try to arrange things where maybe I can have more of the stuff out in front or off to the side.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like this room. What nobody's seeing is lights, cameras, microphones, speakers, TVs, desks, other lighting rigs, other speakers, 50,000 cables, and you just get the pretty wall back there that looks all composed. And still the running joke, none of them work. So so as we know,
they were in tune when you got them.
Yeah, pretty much. So I would actually kind of love to know a little bit about how you got into mandolin and fiddle and violin. Like, what sort of took you that direction?
Oh, yeah, fun. I can't put it down.
Yeah.
It is usually on my lap, even when I'm doing these sorts of
Right.
things. So I got started with Suzuki violin when I was 8.
Oh,
and I'd
cool.
seen somebody play a violin, and so I asked my parents for one. At some point, they were like, okay, yeah, we'll do that. So I took some lessons, and then I heard someone play fiddle. And my teacher, the kindest Suzuki teacher in the world, John Berwan is his name. He's moved to up northwest somewhere, and he's I don't know my classical terms. I think concert master might be the term.
Sure.
He's a big deal wherever that is. Cool. And he worked through a fiddle book with me, even though I think almost every violin teacher out there would be like, no, you got to find someone else.
Yeah.
So fiddle led to, gateway drug. It led to mandolin. I saw somebody play one of those, and I've played fiddle and mandolin ever since.
That's awesome. So, and bluegrass, was that always like your favorite music? You wanted to do that, or was it you sort of came to it just because of the nature of the instruments?
So kind of a weird little group of circumstances. One of them was who I saw playing.
Oh, cool.
And the other was that my parents believed rock music was of the devil. They would have hated your music, Sam, so much. They really believed that it was going to cause all kinds of evil problems to happen, and so it wasn't allowed in the house. So, one of the things I like so much about the mandolin is getting to be the drummer. So who knows, I might have been a drummer, but I'm really glad it was mandolin because it's such a perfect match. So kind of restrictions of what I could do mixed with what I saw someone do, because I had seen people play classical violin and I had seen people play bluegrass and related styles, and the second one really spoke to me.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's funny. That's quite literally the polar opposite of how it worked for me. I think my dad might have thought bluegrass was written by the devil. So,
And it might be.
Yeah, sell your soul at the crossroads, right? So,
exactly.
But that's actually really funny. And you're right, the mandolin sort of it's so percussive that it's it's almost more a drum set than a guitar, and like if you're going to compare in that direction.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. And then I guess just did you play in bands and things as a kid and like do it that way, or were you just always like the basement guitar practicer, or the mandolin fiddle in the basement by yourself, just woodshedding all day, or were you out playing?
I was out playing some, and I grew up in north central Texas, so the biggest basement you're going to get is maybe 2 feet into the ground before you hit limestone.
Yep.
But I did find people I could play out with. By the time I started mandolin at 10 and a serious effort for fiddle at 10.
Cool.
After having taken, my first lessons were the way a lot of people do lessons, a lot of kids do lessons, which is by the semester.
Mm-hmm.
And this semester's fiddle, if that's not a thing, next semester is soccer.
Oh, okay.
Sort of a thing, and it was a thing. I was interested in it, and so we kept going back. Went a couple semesters and found a fiddle teacher, and so took lessons from the fiddle teacher who dabbled in mandolin. I didn't have a lot of mandolin guidance. And by the time I was about 13, I had met some local pickers who would play just little events here or there.
Cool.
It could be some kind of barbecue, and they'd play usually for free. And that was my first experiences in performance, other than my teacher taking her students for. And she didn't do recitals. Instead, it was bring the students to play at a barbecue.
Cool.
Yeah.
Honestly, that sounds way more entertaining than going through another recital.
It's better.
Yeah, definitely. I actually really like that. That's one of those things where I was actually, for my kids, one of the things I'm thinking I might do next year is our town has little festivals each year, like the Oktoberfest and the Fall Festival and the Spring thing. And I was thinking that would be a more entertaining way to do a recital, which is actually just rent out one of the stages for an hour or two and let them actually just go up and perform and have a real audience. And it's so much more valuable, don't you think, than having that fabricated audience that's mom and dad just giving you a wondrous round of applause that's,
Absolutely.
Where it's that real, actual hands-on, like, oh, there's an audience out there, and they don't, it's that first real experience of, hey, they don't even care that I'm playing. Why are they not watching?
Exactly.
And then realizing at the end when you stop that you start hearing the claps from all over the place. And you're like, oh, actually, way more people were paying attention than I thought.
Yeah. Interestingly, I did one of those with, there was a woman I worked for 4 years named Becky Buller, who's a pretty big deal in the bluegrass industry. And
awesome.
Because it's bluegrass, most of our viewers are not going to know who that is.
Right.
She's also a teacher. And we had exactly what we're talking about, a little recital sort of thing. And surprisingly, I had online students come out from other states to do it. A lot of the online teachers are like, well, how am I going to do a recital?
Right.
I had somebody come to Nashville from Indiana and one from Texas and then a couple from other more nearby areas.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you have a very interesting business model. As far as how you teach now, it's one of those that I use it as an example all the time of what's possible. And
awesome.
And so it's one of those things where you teach a small roster, not small, but like you have a dedicated roster, right? Like you set your limit, which I think is interesting because almost everyone I know is going down the more students. You're one of the only ones I know that's like, I don't want any more students. Why would I want more students? You're like, that sounds like more work. I don't want to do that. But in like the best possible way. Could you kind of talk about how you kind of found yourself to such a like lucrative niche, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. So I teach only 18 students a week. It had been as many as 30 or more sometimes. And especially back when I used to teach shorter lessons, like half hour, I only teach up to 50-minute lessons. We've got that flexible time, so I don't feel like somebody has bought me for a certain amount of time. I hate that feeling. I don't want my students feeling like I've got to get every minute worth for this money or else I've left something on the table. So it's all about the goals, and I only teach 18 of them these days. For a long time it was 20, but I've got a 2-year-old and I've got so many other irons in the fire with business-related things and hobbies. So it's 18 max, and my students, I've got 18 members, so every month they choose which 3 they want to, if they're on a Wednesday or whatever, and the one they don't want, I put up on Fonz, and somebody else can pick that spot.
Oh, cool.
Because there's not very many of them, those sell out pretty fast, and I ended up in this type of style for a couple reasons. One was I read the book Oversubscribed, which is a really great recipe for how to create demand.
Okay.
And another was just wanting to be able to perform and things like that. Realizing if I want to perform, I should reduce how much I teach to not get burned out.
Yeah.
And this limited model, there's an episode of South Park where I can't do anything without talking about South Park.
Hey, that's fine with me.
And you probably know this one, but Eric Cartman inherits $1 million. And he goes and he buys his own theme park because he hates the lines.
Yeah.
And then he ends up having to let a few people in so he can run the place and so on. It becomes this huge phenomenon. It's the theme park that you can't go to. And it's a little bit of how my business works. Is there's a 2-year wait. You can't take lessons from me unless you get one of these spots that comes up every now and then.
Yeah.
And it creates this demand that it's not entirely artificial. It really is a limited amount of time for me that creates a demand where people really will wait 2 years on my list to get a lesson.
That's amazing.
Or to get a permanent spot. They don't have to wait 2 years to get a lesson.
Sure. That's a really interesting way of doing it. So they can still take some lessons. They can still get the feelers. They can understand who you are and how you teach. But it's still that process of like, maybe they're taking lessons somewhere else or doing something on their own and then getting like these supplement lessons for you. And then finally, when it's their time, they're already bought into what you're doing. And boom, they're right in there for you. And you fill so I can imagine anytime someone leaves, you literally just flip a switch and the next one comes in and fills that slot. So,
Yeah, I had one recently. Somebody had some bad things going on. They had to stop lessons, and I had the spot filled that afternoon.
Right. Yeah.
The first person on the list, the first person had said no a couple times because the spot I had he couldn't do, and this one just turned out first person could take it, filled a few hours later.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, that's really where you want to find yourself when you're teaching, is in a point where your students and the business doesn't own you. And that is, as we know, the one limitation with teaching is time. You're stuck to how much time can you charge for, and so if you can set some time and then set a good price point on that time, it's like then you can really make it work. I think that's pretty impressive.
It is, and I had no idea how much you could make per hour or per minute or however you calculate it. I just never had any idea that there was that much potential. When I was teaching for $40 an hour, I thought that's where it stopped.
Right.
And it turns out it doesn't stop anywhere near there. And my favorite example is my chess teacher charges $250 an hour.
Yep.
Now he's well known on YouTube and he's an amazing teacher and he's a titled player and there's reasons that he can make that much, but I didn't know teachers could make that much unless you're like, I don't know, like Alison Krause's vocal coach or something.
Exactly. No, I totally get that because there is this sort of stigma, and I'm 100% guilty of this. If anything, I way undercharge for my own lessons. And it's sort of a problem in the sense like I do a similar thing where I have a limited roster. But obviously, because I'm running Muzie the other time.
Yeah, a bit busy.
Yeah, it's like in reality, I should be charging 5 times what I'm charging for my lessons. And that would be more reasonable for the amount of time and effort it's actually taking me to do that. I guess, how did you mentally get yourself to the point where you're like, no, I can charge this? Like, I am worth this? Like, because obviously we don't get into specifics or anything, but once you start passing over let's just say the dollar per minute line, right? So once you start hitting maybe $2 per minute, what is there was there a day where you were just like, all right, we're tripling the prices and this is it. If you don't like it, too bad. Or was it every month you boosted it a few dollars until you finally got to the point where people didn't even realize they were paying you twice as much?
It was a little of both. There were a couple big jumps. When I made the jump from $40 to $60 an hour, that was a single jump there. Mm-hmm. And had some turnover. This is something we talk about in the Muzie group and the Fonz group and every other group. Right. When you do that price raise, usually nobody gets mad.
Yeah.
You might lose a person or two, and usually it's a good turnover. And the new person that comes in has no idea it used to be cheaper. Yeah. And so my big jump from 40 to 60, I had a couple people drop off. Nobody had a problem with it. Everything was just really, I had also at that same time changed to this format of, I think it was that same time, it might have been the next price raise, but changed to this different format of membership and choosing 3 lessons every month and all that. And When I made that jump to 60, the only actual real message I got about it, because most people don't even respond, they just pay the new price,
Right.
was somebody saying, finally, you've raised your rates. I was paying $40 an hour for my son's guitar lessons 17 years ago.
Yeah, that's it. Maybe I'll pick on my old guitar teacher for this one. His rates have been the same basically for forever. He should be charging triple what he's charging. Mm-hmm. He is easily $150 to $200 an hour teacher. He's got a wait list that's a mile long, but just doesn't. I understand there's obvious reasons why you don't want to price out people from what you do, but at the same time, there's a point where you're like, hold on, I need to maximize my life. Like, I don't necessarily need to be teaching 60 hours a week. I can literally cut that down in a third, and I can just charge 3 times as much. And weirdly, that's true. Like, it's like, it doesn't sound like that's actually true. It doesn't sound like you could actually be like, yeah, we're gonna double the rate, and we're just gonna cut half our clients. You're like, okay, but it works. And I know quite a few teachers in that, who are doing what you're doing, would sort of change the format, so it's not your typical once a week at the same time at the same slot every week, and like subscriptions, packages, bundles, semesters, all that kind of stuff, memberships. I think it's really interesting because those are now applicable to what used to just be a very formula based. You pay on the first of the month for these 4 slots, and then again next month, and rinse and repeat.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a time when we're going to see a lot of the normal ways things are done changing. They already are. Everybody's online now.
Right.
The membership system I use, a lot of other teachers have adopted it. It's worked really well with them. I developed it in a mastermind group of 2. A good friend of mine who also runs a business, and we spent a lot of time figuring out exactly what was going to work and tweaked it from there. I also had a mentor who did something similar that I kind of built on that. But the key is to you ask about, how did I come to terms with charging more? Because the imposter syndrome comes in pretty hard.
Right.
And it is based on, and this one is a thing from the Oversubscribed book by Danny Priestley. It's based on the idea of removing yourself from the economy that you're in. And I see this huge mistake music teachers make is one of the reasons they need to get online is they say, well, that's great. You're saying I should charge $75 an hour.
Yeah.
The studios here charge $30. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
You don't compete with them.
Yeah,
there's one Sam Reddy and there's one Nate Lee. We have however many you have. Yeah. That's all you're going to take. Nobody can compete with that because they aren't you. Yeah. And you can go online and choose from everyone within a reasonable time zone.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's actually a really interesting point of view, is the breaking the barrier down. And being online, I've sort of had that mentality for a while, is that I don't care what the industry price is, because it doesn't matter, because I have students in the basically Silicon Valley area, and then then Chicago, and then here in Massachusetts. Like, they're all over the place. So if I was actually to go and get the price point from each of those cities, it would vary drastically. It'd be maybe $25 for half an hour locally, but in downtown LA, it's probably more like $55 for a half hour locally, And it's like, so where do you really find yourself? And I think you're right. You price yourself where you really believe you are supposed to be priced. It's how you value you. It's harder, easier said than done, right?
Yeah, and you really do have to think of it as, I often I do this with my music performances too. When I have a video of a performance I did, I listen to it. I try to listen to it rather than watch it. And when I listen to it, I imagine there's some other dude up there playing.
Oh, cool. Okay,
This guy, he wears a cowboy hat, because I don't wear a cowboy hat. So there's this guy in a cowboy hat. He's about 20 pounds thinner, too. And I listen to him play, and then I decide what I think of his playing. Nice. And when it comes to the music teaching, I have to think the same way. So I think of it as sometimes even as this other business. So what if I'm selling only 18 widgets a month? How much should I charge for that? There's a bunch of people that want a widget. And it helps get away from the idea of, oh, well, am I worth that much? It's, well, there's this limited amount of me. And that, so to me now, the sky's the limit when it comes to hourly rates. I have a goal to catch up with my chess teacher.
Right.
And I'm starting to inch there. but I don't think that has to be the ceiling either.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And I've even seen like packages and subscriptions that people are implementing that are in like the $5 to $1,000 a month kind of deals, where at first you're like, whoa, would anyone? And then you're like, well, if I'm offering this and you have all of these resources available to you, then yeah, I mean, there are people that definitely would. And it's value too to them. Like, you are good at what you do, so you can sort of execute on the expectation. That's, of course, an important factor there, is that you can't just jump your rates up and then not actually be worth that money. You do have to, still deliver. But do you feel, though, that your lessons are any different now that they're way more do you feel more or less pressure to, like, get a perfect lesson in? Like,
I do feel a little more pressure just to really make sure I bring it.
Right.
There is this one thing about teaching for a lot less, is that when, if I were teaching for $20 an hour, I would be tempted to be pretty casual about it and just like, well, I'm not charging that much. This is just me and that person hanging out and whatever. And when charging a lot more, the cheapest lessons I offer for my members is it's $100 for an up to 15-minute lesson. Mm-hmm. And then it goes up to $150 for a 15-minute lesson, depending on which membership they have. Mm-hmm. When I'm charging that much, I really want, even though it's not about getting in every minute of those 15 minutes, I do want every one of the 50 minutes that we actually do, even if we meet for 40 minutes, I want every minute to be really, really good and try really hard to be focused. I should have tried that hard when I was teaching for $20 an hour at 17 years old. But I didn't. But at this hourly rate, I feel like you really, really have to bring something good. And it doesn't mean you have to be the best player either. I have a worksheet that I use in the Lesson Business Blueprint where it goes over the main factors that go into what you can charge. And they include things like, are you a great player? Are you a great teacher? Do you have a wait list? There's plenty of teachers who have a wait list who aren't even that great at players. But they're great teachers, or they're great at marketing. Yeah. There's some people who aren't even good teachers who have a wait list. There's a bunch of factors that can lead to you charging more and having a wait list, and it's not always about how good of a player you are. In fact, a lot of the really amazing players I know who teach don't have a wait list, and you know why. They don't even know how they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's a good point too, is that it's the skill set isn't just can you shred. Like, yeah, you might be able to. Most of the time that doesn't help with teaching. Like, it's a totally different set of skills. So I can understand why, and I've seen tons of times where someone might be a monster player but just can't teach, or can teach like no other and just their chops are very average. But they are so good at explaining and clarifying how things work that it doesn't matter. And I think, and I'd take the latter every time if I could. I'd rather take the person who can explain clearly than just shred for 5 hours. Actually, in college, I took, not really throwing anyone under the bus here. It's very well known that this is teacher Joe Stump. His style is he's shred lord. I mean, he is the shred lord. Like, I think he'll take that as a compliment. Like, that's what he does. But his lessons are just that. Are him noodling most of the time, and then you get a packet with just tabs on it. And it's most of the time not even in like sheet music. It's just tabs, and it's just exercises going down the page, and it's all like 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the literal notes will be like increase tempo, 5 beats per minute every time you play this, and it's like, and that's literally the whole point of the lesson. And for a long time, I was totally bought into that world. I loved just playing fast and doing that, and it works to an extent. But when you actually sit down with a teacher who can eloquently, or words don't work for me, so but when they can really effectively explain something, they don't need to be able to shred in front of you and then be like, hey, now do this. They can just explain it to you, and you can put in the work to get it done. And as we both know, the reality of it is the true work gets done in the week between the lessons.
It's like Victor Wooten says in his book, The Music Lesson, that the so-called fictional teacher, he's a real guy, by the way, I've met him, the teacher, but he says to him, I can't teach you anything, I can only show you. And that's a little bit of wordplay there, just because, what is the difference really? Sure. But there is this thing that as music teachers we're all aware of, and as musicians we're all aware of, is You can give somebody all the information, but they have to figure out what that means to them.
Yeah.
And the great teachers give you the information you need to be able to figure that out.
Right. Yeah. That's 100% is. Yeah, I like that actually. That's Victor Wooten, good. I mean,
yeah, he's awesome.
Doesn't really go wrong, does he? That's pretty awesome. Yeah, we read that book in college, and then it was a signed reading, and then the following month he became the guest lecturer at Berkeley. And I've probably told this story before, but I walk into class, sit down, get my book out, start whatever, and then some guy comes and sits next to me. Didn't think anything of it, and I look over and I'm like, "Is that Victor Wooten?" And then I was like, "Okay, I'll just pretend I don't want to stare at him. He's literally sitting next to me." And then he just kind of like bumps me, and he's like, "Hey man," he's like, "Nice to meet you," and just like handshake, and he's like, basically just like, "Is this the?" It was like creative writing class or something. It wasn't even a like proper music class. And he was like, I was like, "Yeah," and he was like, "Awesome." He's like, as a professor, I'm allowed to like sit in on any classes I want to." And
wow.
So he literally just sat in on the class, and the teacher walked in, was like, "Is that Victor Wooten?" It was really funny. And then later that week, I actually had a funk lab, and I have the recordings of this somewhere on one of my phones. And my teacher, Victor's just walking down the hall, and he sees those 5 guitar players doing a funk lab, and he's like, "Oh, sweet." Comes in, sits down, plugs in a bass, and just starts going to town. And the teacher and him just jam for a bit, and then it's a round robin where each of us got to jump in and go. So it's like me, Victor, and the teacher, and then the next kid, Victor, and the teacher. So like that was pretty cool.
That is cool.
Yeah,
I've never even been in the same room with him, so to me, he's still kind of a fictional character.
Right? He's a super nice guy. I've probably told all this before, but he was at Berkeley, like I just said, a lot while I was there. And when I was building the original Muzie, which was called I Want to Practice, I pitched it in class in the startup lab, and Victor and Steve Bailey, who's the head of the bass department there, the two of them have a bunch of records out together too. They were both in the class, and I ended up pitching it to them. And then it was the Berkeley bass department that actually took on my program for that was my first like customer. Was Victor, Steve, and all the guys in the bass department. They took on our software and used it as like a practice app for their students and things.
That's very cool.
Yeah, so that was always neat. Like that's kind of funny when he pops up a lot, but he was actually pretty influential in kind of getting all of this stuff off the ground and the Muzie we have now. So
yeah, it's amazing the factors that go into something.
Right? It's just those little things. And it was funny because we had just read his book, and I always knew of him, but I don't think I would have had much. I would have been like, "Oh, cool, like the famous bass dude." But after reading his book and then meeting him, you're like, "Oh, whoa, I feel like I know you now." Like,
yeah, the famous bass philosopher.
Yeah, right? That's awesome. So I wanted to sort of jump a little bit is to what you're doing now. So with your pages, your groups, we've been talking kind of off air, in our own time about like the new Facebook groups and the pages and the layouts and all this stuff that's kind of changing in the social world. How are you, taking all that and running with it?
As usual, I'm keeping myself too busy.
Yep.
Too many irons in the fire, but I can't help it. I've tried to stick to one thing before, and it never happens.
Nope.
Just a mix of, I am a person who plans a very healthy amount of time for video games and stuff too, so that is a factor. It's a high priority for me.
Good.
But so much is changing, and it's caused me to have to change the way I do things, or maybe not to have to, but it's caused opportunities where I can change the way I do things. And my side projects, some of our viewers know, is the Lesson Business Blueprint. Mm-hmm. It's my course for people who would like to do what I'm doing. It's an exact roadmap for how to teach for more money, teach fewer people, exactly what to do in the lessons, and so on. So that one is the one that gets the least amount of attention.
Sure.
Because it's my side project. It's last on the list. And that's been my latest thing, is trying to streamline my content creation, because I have a full-time assistant who sometimes sits there with nothing to do because she's waiting on me.
Right. Yeah.
And so working on doing that, we've changed the way we communicate a lot. We use Trello a bunch. For a long time I was using email. Not effective.
Yep.
Not at all. And I think your team, do you use Slack?
Yep, we're all in Slack. That's our bubble.
Yeah, I think if I had more than me and one other person, we'd be in Slack.
Yeah.
But that's changed a lot because I put out a mandolin video every week, a fiddle video every week, and I'm supposed to be putting out a video for Lesson Business Blueprint every week.
Cool.
And then I'm in the middle of a big string testing shootout because my favorite strings got discontinued.
Yep.
I'm very, very grumpy about it. If anybody wants to see me grumpy, just watch those videos. I think that the company wants me to stop. But they should just start making my strings again.
I think it's pretty fair. At the very minimum, they can send you the backlog that they have in the factory. And just...
Exactly. And I do have like 10 sets right under here, but I don't want to use them. So anyway, busy with all that, but I've stumbled into some social media things that really work that I wanted to take just a minute to share because we have this big problem on Facebook pages, Facebook pages, which is nobody looks at them.
Yes.
At all. And the new page experience that I think you said you just got, and they finally rolled it out to the last one of my pages, is amazing because it's basically like having a personal profile. I kind of wonder if they noticed we were all moving away from our personal profiles and thought, how can we get them back on here?
I think that's exactly what was happening. Well, groups, I think, blew up, and people realized that, like, they were like, oh, okay, there needs to be this community. And what they were realizing is groups were actually just pages. It was just the business just redoing exactly what they were supposed to. Like a page should, like the Muzie teacher group, that should be the Muzie page. Like I shouldn't have to create another group that then have you all filter from here to there and then we can talk. Where it's like, why can't I just post all of this on the public page that everyone can see? But the algorithm was basically drowning it, so it was a waste of your time.
Yeah, I remember when they announced like 3 or 4 years ago that algorithm's going to favor groups now, and we were all like, "Oh crap, gotta learn how to do that." And it's only minimal hassles for normal sort of sized groups.
Right.
So for mine, and actually the strategy I've been using has caused my group membership to nearly triple in the last 6 months.
Wow.
And what I'm doing, and I think this will work for anybody, is I'm all totally mandolin focused right now. I make a fiddle video every week because I do have a following that plays fiddle, but I'm not pushing that at all.
Sure.
If I had my druthers, I would will just gradually transfer into only doing mandolin stuff. Fiddle's great, but mandolin speaks to me. So I'm doing these videos every week, and I actually learned this approach from a good friend of mine, Ned Luberecki, who's a fantastic banjo player. He was doing it to get page likes. And what he would do is he would make a post on his business page, which now he's got the new page experience too, so now it's the only thing he uses, I think. But he'd make a post there, and then he'd share it to all the banjo-related things and all the bluegrass-related things. And once you've done that, you can look at the list of likes, and next to it, most of them probably are going to have an invite button. And you sit there and you just invite them to like your page.
Interesting.
If it shows it to them again. This is a thing Eric Brenner was messing with a while back, was I'm going to go to all these pages and I'm going to engage with some of them and not with others and see what Facebook shows me.
Interesting.
And I believe his result was the ones he engaged with, he saw those pages again.
Mm-hmm.
So I took that idea, started with it, just trying to get more. My Plain Eightley is my teaching business, and that page has less than 1,000 followers, but it's blowing up. Every week I make a mandolin video. It's short and sweet. I mean, a lot of times I forget to even turn on my lighting and stuff, and some of them are bad videos. I'm trying to get better about remembering. Sometimes we look better on
the whole production side.
Yeah. So I make the video. I show all the mandolin groups. I make sure something applicable in the mandolin really welcome instructional material. A few that don't, and of course I don't share there.
Sure.
So I always to put in either the description of the say question about I have a video on the Playdate YouTube in case anybody's wondering. In the original post, how do you attach your strap, or what's your favorite strap? Do you have another gear-related hack? They blow up. I invite them all to my I invite them all to my page.
Yeah.
In the description of every video, You've got the YouTube style line
Right.
items. Take lessons from me here. Join my Facebook group here. Adding that one line tripled my Facebook group membership in 6 months.
Wow. Okay.
And then the last piece is once a week. It's every Wednesday. I do an engagement post.
Cool.
And it's the same thing. It's give me your opinion on something. And I try to make them funny, if possible. I think I'm funny more than a lot of the other people do. And then I just get the sympathy groans. You know?
Yeah.
The most recent one was, my all-time favorite musician is Sam Bush. And you're familiar with Sam, I think.
Yeah.
And the most recent and one of the most successful ones, if anyone wants to check it out, just go to Play Nately on Facebook. That's Play space Nately. The one from last week is, who is your favorite mandolin player and why is it Sam Bush? And it blew up. Tons of comments, tons of likes. Facebook is now showing pages more often to people who haven't liked your page.
Nice.
So I invite all them. And I just do one of those every week.
I like that.
It's what's your favorite mandolin strings?
Yep.
D'Addario, GHS,
Right.
Mapes, Billy Strings playing the mandolin. That one went nuts. You don't have to have a lot. You just ask people questions, and the page engagement has been insane.
That's fantastic, because that has been a massive issue. I mean, I made the mistake with the Muzie group of not starting it when I started the business. So the Muzie group is like only a year old or something. It's not. So if we missed the first entire year of users, basically. So it should be like 10 times bigger than it really is right now. And that's sort of something I always think about, because I'm like, I get kind of like, Facebook likes don't matter in the sense that like our business has users a lot more, way more than our Facebook page has. The only issue I have is, I've experienced this decent amount, is that people will come to me and they might be in a demo and they're like, oh, so are you guys like new? And you're like, oh no, like we've been doing this for a while. That number isn't even remotely accurate. They're like, oh, do you have like 300 teachers on your platform? You're like, if I had 300 teachers on the platform, I don't think I'd be in business anymore. Like, it's like, like I couldn't do that for 2 years. Like, so it's like, I think it's funny because it's currently a very inaccurate representation of the business, but at the same time, it's because it's being actually a really inaccurate way of representing a business, where the pages don't go to the right people. They don't it ends up just being followed by like half your old Facebook friends from college and high school, and then like a couple of people that actually want to find like we were saying, the algorithms were all weird and people were going to groups instead of pages, and then you're basically taking all the work you've just done with your page, where I think our page has like twice as many as the group does, and it's like, because that we had been building for a couple of years without, and then I didn't even realize that I needed a group. I was assuming everybody was going to go to the page, and then it's like, oh man, and now they're swapping back to pages, and it's like, you're like, thanks, Facebook.
That's the fault of it being somebody's job to think of new things.
I know, right? It is kind of funny, though, that we've all ended up on Facebook, though. So, it's, let me know if you know of anywhere else, but for as far as I can see, it is the Facebook groups that are basically the music teaching community of the world or of the country. Like, if you guys want to get together, you jump in the groups and start chatting, and that's it. And, where I think back in the day, we would have actually relied on like an actual forum or some kind, or like a dedicated place, but it's just Facebook groups as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I'm trying to get into Slack. I say I'm trying to get into, yesterday I was talking to a good friend about this, and now I think I want to figure out how to try to get into Slack. A little tough with Mandolin because a lot of the audience is old, and we're lucky they got on Facebook.
Yes, right.
But I follow gaming streamers on Slack, and the setup for communicating with their fans, like I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, like having the Discord servers and things like that. So where like you can get I think Eric tried this with Fonz. They tried a Discord for a little while, and I think it's one of those things where I think you're right, is that the older generation probably not that interested in jumping down again to another new thing that's but I think you're right, the way gamers do it is probably a really good way of thinking about how to engage your audience. Because they're the best at it. I mean, they have the competitions, they have the Discord mods, they have the servers that you can all be a part of, they have the streaming that you can watch and sort of interact with, and that's sort of like the hope of this show, is that like the next segment in this is we'll do a news segment, and then we'll do like a And then I'll have like a link open, so if anybody wants to join into and say hi, they're more than welcome to. So I think like these are the kinds of things we're starting to play with, to sort of be like, okay, well, yes, we're a software technology company at the core, but really we're an education resource. Like that's really what we want to be and what we actually are for people. And so, having something like this show, and what we're going to do with this show, this is our week's worth of content right here. So the idea was now on Mondays, we can go live, we can have someone like you come in, we can talk, we'll clip out all of the 1-minute clips from this that we can then go throw on Instagram Reels and put in the stories and stuff like that. So all week, our content pool will be the news segment, the tips and tricks, the interviews, and now we've got a dozen pieces that we can put forward. And like you, I've got someone who can actually do all that. And I felt similarly where a lot of the time I was like, I don't have enough content for you to post. Sometimes I'd be like, can you just make things up? Like, just like make some more memes or something. Like those work. Like, and those actually do work quite well. The memes, if you can get a good meme, that's definitely a good little boost to your page.
Yeah. They're amazing.
Yeah.
Some of the things that, one of the things that I thought was going to be amazing when I first started really trying to get Facebook engagement was I thought, I love to see these like inspirational quotes. I'm going to do that. Surprisingly to me, nothing.
Crickets.
Nobody cares about even a quote from Victor Wooten on my page. But you take any one of those popular memes and put Mandolin where it normally says something else.
And boom.
It's amazing. Yeah.
No, you're right. It is pretty funny. Like we just did one the other day, the what's his name, just standing around waiting, and it was like, what are you gonna do now with all the free time since you started using Muzie? It's like, and those are the kinds of things, because I like the creativity side of it, and you're also sort of telling people what your business does. We're like, hey, we save music teachers time. That's really the crux of what Muzie does, and here's a funny way of sort of representing that. And like and I think that's going to become a staple in our content creation. But I guess we could kind of sum up that this conversation is really about content creation. It is about that if you want to sort of keep pushing forward with your business and you want to kind of stay in front of everything, it's that constant need to put stuff out. And, I think you're sort of showing that with that consistency, you really can keep growing and that the market is ripe for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I should probably share, too, the end game of that whole system that I'm doing. I did put out a short video on this on the Lesson Business Blueprint page a while back. I haven't figured out how to market that one. So if anybody watching wants to go be like number 20 or something, go for it. It'd be the second person to ever watch the video. Thanks, Mom. Anyway, I do have a video on that topic a little more. But the end game is student sign-ups at my higher rates. So get new people in. People are going to always shift out at some point.
Right.
And I'm getting usually an inquiry every couple of weeks. And I used to get almost zero inquiries from social media.
Right. And that's a massive change, because if you can get people coming to you based off of the work that you were already going to be doing, that's essentially free marketing. I mean, and it's showing that it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Is that it's supposed to build the brand and get people interested in what's going on, and I think that's I'm actually in the funds group. Was it who put that post? Someone had a really good post up recently that Eric keeps bringing back, because he was saying just how well it organically grew, and I think that's dead on. Is that if you have good content and it really you're putting your content out consistently, you will see the return. And that's when, if you do this and you don't see the return, then the question has got to be, okay, there's something wrong with my content. What is it? And how can I tweak this? And because we know for a fact that when people do put out the good content, it does grow their businesses. So, it's sort of like a pretty obvious thing, but I think it's a little harder to sort of realize sometimes when you're on the inside. You might be like, am I not putting it out at the right time? Am I putting it in the wrong groups? And sometimes that might be it, but sometimes it is just you maybe need to reevaluate what it is you're putting out. And like you said, the quotes don't work. And you might have thought that quotes were the thing that were going to get people interested. Or you might try memes and they might just not work. And, So you're going to have to try a couple different things to see what actually kind of lands.
Yeah. And if anybody watching wants to give this strategy a try, go to the Play Nately Facebook page. There is about 8 months of this attempt on there now that you can go and see which things worked and which didn't and all of that. So it's, if anybody wants to go and steal that idea, who's your favorite mandolin player and why is it Sam Bush? Is not an original thought.
You're right.
And all you've got to do is change out mandolin for,
Yep, whatever you play and just pick the most. Yeah, exactly, right? Just pick the most obvious person in your genre and run with it. Well, that's really awesome. So I guess any other sort of any last words of wisdom before we wrap up? Is there...
what are my last words? You want those to be really, really good.
They got to be so profound that you can't. So no pressure now, right?
There's actually, this is not related to anything we've talked about, but it's something that's been on my mind a little bit because of the time of year. And this is mostly for people with adult students. Almost anything I say is for people with adult students. I don't teach kids.
Right.
It's like Eric Cartman when he goes into that one school. He's like, how do I reach these kids? I don't know how to reach these kids. I don't teach kids. But this time of year for adults, they're going to miss entire weeks of practice. For dedicated students who practice, they're going to miss entire weeks. And it's really important to remember that they are going to beat themselves up like crazy.
Right.
And as much as teachers, we don't want to give a free pass of, sure, don't practice, it's fine. With the adults, especially the busy ones, translation, the ones with the money to pay whatever rate you want, they might be an attorney or something. They actually have bigger fish to fry. Right. And my job with half my students is to help them have a good time. Right. Remembering not to shame them or give them any kind of grief over it is important because they are already beating themselves up. And us beating them up is too much to handle sometimes.
I agree. And I think it does relate a little bit to some of the younger students, because, you get the ones that are, I was so busy. And really what they mean is, I was so busy playing the new Call of Duty that I didn't look at my guitar this week. Where then you do have some students
Which I understand.
Right? And I get that. And then I do have some students who are genuinely like, oh, I'm sorry, I was away for the week. I did not have my instrument. And it's like, okay, no big deal. We'll just pick up where we left off. But I think you're right. I think that's a really good way to think about it, is that it is our job to encourage, not discourage. So if that means stepping back a little bit and making it easier for them, then fine. That's what you need to do sometimes.
Yeah, and of course we have to be chameleons. There are some students who really need somebody to push them.
Right.
But for my business model, the majority of them are there to have fun, and the ones who are really serious, they don't miss that week anyway. There isn't a time when they tell me I didn't practice this week, because they will suffer at work or whatever to play. But for most music teachers, there's not really going to be that many who are trying to go pro or whatever. Right. Most of our students
just want to have
normal
fun.
People, and they get busy.
Yeah, I think that's super fair. That's a really good way to think about it. Well, thank you so much, Nate, for helping me out with episode 1 of the Muzie Show.
It's an honor to be here for it. Thank you for including me.
Absolutely. And well, it's funny because last time we spoke was actually like 6 or 7 months ago. And it feels almost like it wasn't. And then I was like, well, actually,
I know.
It's been a really long time. We should probably catch up and see what's going on in Nate's world now. And it's like, it's so funny how it's like, oh, man, that whole adage, you get older, life moves faster. I'm starting to understand it. Like, these years definitely start to blend together. But
absolutely, you're almost 30 now.
Yeah, so. Yeah. I see. Oh, and I've only got 15 days off of the year. So I'm 15 days into my 1-year project, which is Forbes 30 under 30. That's still
I know that one too. Yeah,
that's my irrational goal. That. So my irrational goal is 30 under 30. I don't know. I must have seen it in a magazine store when I was a kid, and like that just stuck in my head. And so I've got 11 months left. I also don't have any idea how to even get on for it. I don't know if you like nominate, or if they just like pick from the top Silicon Valley guys, or like no idea. So maybe there's like a sub version we could find that's like 30 under 30 in music technology.
It's like a band I used to play with that's on the Cumberland River here on a riverboat, and they'd always say to their audience, this year we've been nominated the best band in Nashville in our price range on this particular river.
Yep. Absolutely, I love it. Well,
Um,
awesome.
but you're totally deserving of it, and really, you're only some amount less than 1 year and 14 days away from getting it. So there you
Exactly.
go.
So
You don't have to wait any longer than that.
exactly, it'll go right there between the guitars on the wall.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for having me. It's all great chatting. Oh, I feel like I should mention for our listeners too, our last chat, I believe, is still available,
Yeah.
and it's about studio setup. So
Yeah,
check
yeah,
that
yeah,
out.
definitely. Yeah, it's on our YouTube channel, I think. And did you have a copy of it too?
I have a copy of it that I haven't shared because it was on yours. I figured I'd
Okay.
wait a while, so maybe I'll share that this
Yeah,
week.
yeah, maybe that could be your content for the week then. But yeah, if anyone wants to go
Yeah.
check out more of me and Nate hammering out, so then that's definitely more technical. That's really talking about lights,
Mm-hmm.
cameras, and the whole actual setup. But I'll be well when you finally settle in the new home. Let me know, and we'll jump back in for hopefully Muzie episode 50 or something, and we'll see what the new setup's like, and we can go through it all then again.
Absolutely. That sounds great.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I hope you have a good day. And for the watchers, we're going to take like a 2-minute break just so I can figure out the technical side of things. And then we're going to cut to a news segment or something. I've got some really interesting stuff about the Beatles today to tell everybody. So, yeah, let's see what happens.
Awesome.
Hello, everybody. I think this is live. It's kind of hard for me to tell from this side of the room, but thank you, Nate, for joining us for that interview. That was awesome. It's really nice catching up again. Like I said, we'll do another one in a couple months to see how the new setup goes. But now is sort of our news segment, I guess. So there's a couple of really interesting things going on in the world. Half of it is Beatles news, of course, because the Beatles still seem to be the number one news item, even though they've been around for maybe 40 years, maybe longer. So we'll get to that in a second, but there's a couple of fun little things. So Ed Sheeran is writing the new Pokemon theme song. Just excited to see what that is. The original Pokemon theme song is a classic. So we'll just have to see how that one comes out. Should be interesting. And I know he got a new Pokemon tattoo on his arm, so at least he fully invested in for that role. Rihanna is booked for the Super Bowl, so that should be pretty interesting. It was just announced recently that's going to happen, so we shall see her at the Super Bowl, I guess. That's all we know so far. I'm not sure who all the other surprise acts and guests are going to be. The really interesting item in the news today is Own Our Venue. So Own Our Venue is an organization. It's currently in the UK. I'm not sure if they are in other countries yet. But what they actually originally started at was a crowdfunding organization to buy up old pubs, old mail centers, old rec halls and places that were basically just falling apart and losing out to higher rent and just less interest in what it was. What's really cool about this, though, is it's partially crowdfunded, partially investor-backed. And the goal now is to buy 9 venues all over the UK and put them in rent-controlled environments. So basically, the owners of these venues will be supplemented. The crowdfunding will help improve the quality of the buildings, rebuild things, paint, redo everything physically. And then, as I said, they're sort of putting them in a rent control environment. So going forward, the landlords aren't going to be able to price them out and just shut down the venues. I think this is really important because, as anyone knows, small venues are the sort of the foundation to playing music, especially getting out there when you're young and just being able to go to the local place and play. For me, we had a place called the Sad Cafe. Unfortunately, that is also not around anymore. Up in New Hampshire, that was one of the venues to play at. In Boston, even the Middle East, that was the club that every Berklee student was pretty much, that was the go-to venue, and that's going to be knocked down and turned into a hotel. So it is a little disappointing to see this kind of change. I understand it's just the way the world goes. It's economics. If you've got a dingy dive bar playing, bands that aren't selling out, then you can understand that the fancy new hotel is probably going to be a little bit more profitable for the investors. But it is really awesome to see that they've decided to do this. There's a genuine effort to save live music. Ed Sheeran is actually involved in this somehow. I think he just backs the project, maybe financially, but at least personally. So I think that's really neat. As I said, right now I believe it's currently only in the UK. But I would absolutely love to see something like that occur here. I think a lot of us would be the people that would crowdfund that. And so Beatles news. So the Beatles news is actually quite interesting. There's quite a few different little things going on. The big one is the Revolver bonus tracks. So the Beatles albums, the Beatle album Revolver is being re-released in a very super special edition 5 CD box set. It's 63 songs, 100-page hardcover book, and a whole bunch of other goodies. Basically, it's all the rehearsal sessions for all the songs. So you'll see on the track listing, Song A, take 1, Song A, take 2, Song A, take 3. And then some of them were interesting, one song, I can't remember what the title was, but it was original song, and then the next one was original song slowed down for master recording. So there was a couple songs I wasn't even aware of that the one that we know and love is actually a slowed down version of the actual original, and the actual original was never released. Specifically, this is not on this album, but the Strawberry Fields song is one of my favorite Beatles sort of trivia. So the way that song was recorded is pretty unique. the Beatles were, as if you don't know, the first band to basically get unlimited studio time. So they literally had anything at their disposal to create new music, and people like George Martin and Phil Spector behind them to make the music pretty incredible. But Strawberry Fields is a really interesting song because the first half of that song is actually played at a different tempo and in a different key. The second half of the song is a different recording, and that is played tempo and in a completely different key. The first one, and scissors back in proper editing, is they adjusted the speed for the two sides so that they would be equal. So the first half of the song was sped up, the second half of the song was slowed down. And as you know, with the way that audio processing works, especially back when we were doing it with tape, is you will get sort of a pitch effect. So the song is in like a somewhere between G and A key. So if you're trying to play along with it, you have to sort of purposely detune your guitar or instrument to work. I just thought that was a really interesting example of how, one of the best bands in history got to do what they got to do. Is they unlimited studio time with some of the best producers. So this new box set I think will be really interesting because you're going to get a glimpse inside of sort of the minds of how it all worked. And we are also supposed to get a sad version of Yellow Submarine, which I am very curious to hear. I would love to see what that's all about. And then sort of one more little Beatles thing. It's not really news, but right now on Reddit, there's a little thread going about Beatles Mistakes. And there's actually a website we found that is entirely Beatles Mistakes. And it's things like you can hear in like Hey Jude, you can hear John Lennon swearing in the background right before the end of the first or the last chorus. There's examples where you can hear like the engineers knocking on the windows to try to get people's attention, or chairs scraping in the background, or people missing a line or a cue. And it's just interesting because nowadays with all digital recording, there are no outtakes really. You just delete it and redo it. But with everything being tape, they have a lot of the genuine mistakes. So I think that's really neat. It's just kind of a fun sort of way to approach the music, is sort of find the holes. And it's pretty rare nowadays, as I was saying, everything is just so processed that you'd be hard pressed to find anything that was actually wrong, not on purpose. But yeah, I just sort of wanted to bring those news items to your attention. I believe the box set's pretty expensive, and it comes out next month. So if Beatles is your thing, then keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, like I said, the new Pokemon song by Ed Sheeran comes out tomorrow, I think. So I'll be definitely playing that. Rihanna will be doing the Super Bowl, and I assume a couple of other guest artists. And the Own Our Venue organization, and we'll actually try to find a link for the Own Our Venue thing and put that in the chat or comments or whatever in this video. That way, if it is something you're interested in, helping out or crowdfunding with or just supporting, we'll find out a little bit more about that specifically. And now one sort of last fun piece of news. I'm gonna jump over here to my computer, so I'll cut the feed in a second to do this one. But there's a new video game out. It's the very first trombone video game. Unfortunately, it's not VR. I was really, really hoping that I could slap my headset on and start playing a virtual trombone. Maybe soon. Who knows? Maybe that's Muzie's next project. But this is called Trombone Champ. And it's a little bit like Guitar Hero, but for trombones. It's cool. It seems to be very fun. It has a 10 out of 10 rating on Steam, which is pretty impressive. And that's with 900 reviews. I don't think I've ever seen anything hit that solid of a review score. So I'll cut over here and show you guys a little clip of what it actually looks like. But it does sound like a lot of fun. So I'll be right back. Cool. So now we're on the should be on the screen share. Hopefully you guys can still see and hear me. So Trombone Champ, this is the game. This is their website. I get very Wii vibes from this. It looks like they literally took the models out of the Wii console from about 20 years ago, but I'm totally cool with that. I'm just going to play a little clip of their trailer. I don't want to obviously get copyrighted or anything because there is music in here. But I'll just play a super little short clip so you can kind of see what they're doing. There's even like collections of like you can get like special edition like trading cards and things of famous trombone players and such. So here we'll just jump ahead, and I believe that the video feed is probably freezing. It looks like my computer's moving pretty slow right now. So we'll see if we can get this to work. If not, yeah, okay. Alright, well, I guess the video's not wanting to load, but if you were able to see that little clip there, you can kind of tell. It's basically a Guitar Hero-esque environment, with the notes moving up and down, and you control the trombone player. Yeah.